The day my mother told me I should give up my rightful inheritance to my sister was the day I realized blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I sat across from her at our family's antique dining table, the same one where we'd celebrated countless birthdays and holidays, as she explained why my sister Emma deserved what my father had left me. Little did she know, I had built something far more valuable than anything my father could have left behind, a company worth over $10 million that no one in my family knew existed. I remember the morning everything began to unravel with perfect clarity. It was an unusually warm spring day, the kind where the air feels heavy with anticipation. I had driven 3 hours to visit my childhood home for what I thought would be a normal family gathering, the first since my father's funeral, 6 weeks earlier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The sprawling Victorian house I grew up in looked the same as always. Meticulously maintained gardens flanking the cobblestone pathway, white paint gleaming in the sunshine, blue shutters framing each window precisely as my father had insisted they should be. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed Emma's sleek black luxury SUV parked near the entrance, a vehicle that seemed far too expensive for someone who constantly complained about financial struggles. My sister had always had a knack for projecting an image of success while secretly drowning in debt. My modest sedan looked almost embarrassingly practical beside it, though ironically, I was the one who could afford much more. As I approached the front door, voices drifted through the open windows. My mother and Emma were deep in conversation, their tones hushed but intense. I hesitated, hand poised to knock, when I caught a fragment that made my blood run cold. "Dad would have wanted me to have it," Emma was saying. "You know how he always understood my situation better than anyone." My mother's response was gentle but firm. "We'll talk to Lily about it when she arrives. I'm sure she'll understand once we explain everything." I stood frozen on the porch, a strange hollowness expanding in my chest. They were discussing me, or, rather, what I owned, what my father had specifically left to me in his will. I considered turning around, driving away, and postponing this conversation until I felt more prepared. But I'd never been one to avoid difficult situations. Taking a deep breath, I knocked firmly on the door. The conversation inside abruptly ceased. Footsteps approached, and then my mother stood before me, her face arranged in a welcoming smile. That didn't quite reach her eyes. "Lily, darling, we were just talking about you," she said, embracing me with the faint scent of her signature perfume enveloping me momentarily. The familiar smell that had once meant comfort now felt cloying, almost suffocating. "I heard," I replied simply, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled of cinnamon and coffee, my mother's standard offering for family discussions. Emma appeared in the archway leading to the living room, her expression carefully neutral. At 35, 2 years my senior, she had always been the more conventionally beautiful sister, tall and willowy with our father's striking blue eyes and our mother's golden hair. Today, she was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as designer clothes, a detail that didn't escape my notice given her supposed financial difficulties. "Hey, Lil," she said, the childhood nickname feeling inappropriate now. "Good drive?" "Fine," I answered, the tension already building between my shoulder blades. "What were you two discussing about me before I arrived?" My directness had always been a source of contention in our family. My father had appreciated it. My mother and sister had always found it uncomfortable. My mother sighed, gesturing toward the dining room. "Let's sit down. I've made coffee, and we might as well address this now." The dining room was flooded with light from the bay windows overlooking the garden. 3 cups were already arranged on the table, suggesting they'd been waiting to have this conversation. I took my usual seat, the chair to the right of where my father would have sat at the head of the table. Emma sat opposite me, while my mother took what had been my father's place, a subtle shift in family hierarchy that didn't go unnoticed. "Lily," my mother began, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, "we need to discuss your father's will." "What about it?" I asked, leaving my own cup untouched. Everything was quite clear, I thought. My father, Thomas Bennett, had built a successful construction company from nothing. While not extraordinarily wealthy, he'd left behind a comfortable estate, the fully paid house, some investments, his collection of rare books, and, most significantly, a plot of commercial land on the outskirts of town that had been in our family for generations. The land had recently become valuable as the city expanded in that direction. Developers had been making offers for years, but my father had always refused to sell. In his will, he'd divided things fairly from my perspective. Emma received half, the liquid assets and investments, while I got the other half plus the land. My mother kept the house and its contents, along with her own separate savings. It had seemed equitable, considering Emma had already received significant financial help from our parents throughout her adult life. "Your sister is going through a difficult time," my mother continued, glancing at Emma, who immediately adopted an expression of practiced vulnerability. "The divorce has been hard on her, and with the kids to consider." Emma had recently separated from her husband, though from what I'd gathered, she had been the one to initiate it. Her 2 children, my niece and nephew, whom I adored despite the complicated dynamics with their mother, were adjusting to the new reality. "I'm sorry about that," I said sincerely, "but I'm not sure what it has to do with Dad's will." "The land," Emma interjected, leaning forward. "I need it, Lily, I really do. With the divorce settlement still uncertain and the kids' private school tuition." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I stared at her, momentarily, speechless. The land was worth well over $2 million now, possibly more to the right developer. It was also the only connection I had left to my father's legacy, something he had specifically wanted me to have. "You're asking me to give you the land?" I clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain I understood. "Not give," my mother intervened, smoothly. "We thought perhaps you could sell it and split the proceeds with your sister. She needs the money far more than you do, dear." The assumption stung. Yes, I lived modestly. A small but comfortable apartment, a 6-year-old car, no flashy displays of wealth. But that was by choice, not necessity. For years I'd been building my tech company in secret, wanting to succeed or fail on my own merits without my family's influence. What had started in my tiny apartment bedroom had grown into something substantial, something I was fiercely proud of, with over 50 employees and recent acquisition offers that had made my head spin. No one in my family knew. I'd kept it separate, partly because I wanted independence, and partly because I knew exactly what would happen if they found out, exactly what was happening now, even without that knowledge. "That land was specifically left to me," I said carefully. "Dad knew what he was doing when he made his will." Emma's expression hardened slightly. "Dad didn't realize how things would turn out for me. He couldn't have known about the divorce, or how Philip would fight me on every penny." "And he certainly couldn't have anticipated how well you're doing," my mother added. "Your job at that tech company has been very stable. You don't have children to support. Your sister's needs are simply greater right now." The irony almost made me laugh. The job my mother referred to had been my cover story for years, a middle management position that explained my comfortable but modest lifestyle. In reality, I was the founder and CEO of Blue Matrix Solutions, a software company specializing in supply chain logistics that had revolutionized inventory management for mid-sized businesses. My stable job had made me a millionaire many times over. "This isn't about needs," I said, feeling a familiar disappointment settle over me. "This is about respecting Dad's wishes." "Your father would want you to help your sister," my mother insisted, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she'd used throughout our childhood when ending discussions. Family comes first, Lily. Always. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I glanced between them, suddenly seeing the situation with painful clarity. They had decided this before I arrived. In their minds, this wasn't a discussion. It was a formality. They expected me to acquiesce, as I often had throughout my life when faced with the united front of my mother and sister. I need to think about this, I said finally, buying myself time. Emma's face fell slightly. She had expected immediate agreement. There's really nothing to think about. You don't need the money, I do. It's that simple. It's not about money, I replied, feeling something shift inside me. It's about principle. Principles don't pay for your niece and nephew's education, Emma shot back, her vulnerability act slipping. Neither does your new SUV or those Louboutins you're wearing, I observed quietly. The room fell silent. My mother looked shocked that I'd noticed, or perhaps that I'd had the audacity to mention it. That's not fair, Emma eventually said. My image is important for my work. I have to look successful, even when I'm struggling. Emma worked in real estate, where appearance certainly mattered, but her spending had always exceeded reasonable, professional requirements. While I drove a practical car and lived below my means, she maintained the facade of wealth at the expense of actual financial stability. I think we should table this discussion for now, my mother suggested, her tone indicating her disappointment in my reluctance. Lily, please just consider what we're asking. Your sister deserves this chance to get back on her feet. As I drove home that evening, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The familiar roads blurred before me as I replayed the conversation, the entitlement, the assumptions, the casual dismissal of my father's explicit wishes. For years, I'd kept my success separate from my family life, wanting validation that wasn't tied to financial achievement. I'd craved their respect for who I was, not what I owned. But as the highway stretched before me, I realized I'd been protecting people who wouldn't do the same for me. Maybe it was time the truth came out. Maybe it was time they learned that the daughter they thought needed to sacrifice for her struggling sister had built something more valuable than they could imagine, and had done it entirely on her own. I remember the morning everything began to unravel with perfect clarity. It was an unusually warm spring day, the kind where the air feels heavy with anticipation. I had driven 3 hours to visit my childhood home for what I thought would be a normal family gathering. The first, since my father's funeral 6 weeks earlier. The sprawling Victorian house I grew up in looked the same as always. Meticulously maintained gardens flanking the cobblestone pathway, white paint gleaming in the sunshine, blue shutters framing each window precisely as my father had insisted they should be. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed Emma's sleek black luxury SUV parked near the entrance. A vehicle that seemed far too expensive for someone who constantly complained about financial struggles. My sister had always had a knack for projecting an image of success while secretly drowning in debt. My modest sedan looked almost embarrassingly practical beside it, though ironically, I was the one who could afford much more. As I approached the front door, voices drifted through the open windows. My mother and Emma were deep in conversation, their tones hushed but intense. I hesitated, hand poised to knock, when I caught a fragment that made my blood run cold. Dad would have wanted me to have it, Emma was saying. You know how he always understood my situation better than anyone. My mother's response was gentle but firm. We'll talk to Lily about it when she arrives. I'm sure she'll understand once we explain everything. I stood frozen on the porch, a strange hollowness expanding in my chest. They were discussing me, or rather what I owned, what my father had specifically left to me in his will. I considered turning around, driving away, and postponing this conversation until I felt more prepared. but I'd never been one to avoid difficult situations. Taking a deep breath, I knocked firmly on the door. The conversation inside abruptly ceased. Footsteps approached, and then my mother stood before me, her face arranged in a welcoming smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Lily, darling, we were just talking about you," she said, embracing me with the faint scent of her signature perfume enveloping me momentarily. The familiar smell that had once meant comfort now felt cloying, almost suffocating. "I heard," I replied simply, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled of cinnamon and coffee, my mother's standard offering for family discussions. Emma appeared in the archway leading to the living room, her expression carefully neutral. At 35, 2 years my senior, she had always been the more conventionally beautiful sister, tall and willowy with our father's striking blue eyes and our mother's golden hair. Today she was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as designer clothes, a detail that didn't escape my notice given her supposed financial difficulties. "Hey, Lil," she said, the childhood nickname feeling inappropriate now. "Good drive?" "Fine," I answered, the tension already building between my shoulder blades. "What were you two discussing about me before I arrived?" My directness had always been a source of contention in our family. My father had appreciated it. My mother and sister had always found it uncomfortable. My mother sighed, gesturing toward the dining room. "Let's sit down. I've made coffee, and we might as well address this now." The dining room was flooded with light from the bay windows overlooking the garden. 3 cups were already arranged on the table, suggesting they'd been waiting to have this conversation. I took my usual seat, the chair to the right of where my father would have sat at the head of the table. Emma sat opposite me, while my mother took what had been my father's place, a subtle shift in family hierarchy that didn't go unnoticed. "Lily," my mother began, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, "we need to discuss your father's will." "What about it?" I asked, leaving my own cup untouched. Everything was quite clear, I thought. My father, Thomas Bennett, had built a successful construction company from nothing. While not extraordinarily wealthy, he'd left behind a comfortable estate, the fully paid house, some investments, his collection of rare books, and, most significantly, a plot of commercial land on the outskirts of town that had been in our family for generations. The land had recently become valuable as the city expanded in that direction. Developers had been making offers for years, but my father had always refused to sell. In his will, he'd divided things fairly from my perspective. Emma received half, the liquid assets and investments, while I got the other half plus the land. My mother kept the house and its contents, along with her own separate savings. It had seemed equitable, considering Emma had already received significant financial help from our parents throughout her adult life. "Your sister is going through a difficult time," my mother continued, glancing at Emma, who immediately adopted an expression of practiced vulnerability. "The divorce has been hard on her, and with the kids to consider." Emma had recently separated from her husband, though from what I'd gathered, she had been the one to initiate it. Her 2 children, my niece and nephew, whom I adored despite the complicated dynamics with their mother, were adjusting to the new reality. "I'm sorry about that," I said sincerely, "but I'm not sure what it has to do with Dad's will." "The land," Emma interjected, leaning forward. "I need it, Lily. I really do. With the divorce settlement still uncertain and the kids' private school tuition." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I stared at her, momentarily, speechless. The land was worth well over $2 million now, possibly more to the right developer. It was also the only connection I had left to my father's legacy, something he had specifically wanted me to have. "You're asking me to give you the land?" I clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain I understood. "Not give," my mother intervened, smoothly. "We thought perhaps you could sell it and split the proceeds with your sister." She needs the money far more than you do, dear. The assumption stung. Yes, I lived modestly, a small but comfortable apartment, a 6-year-old car, no flashy displays of wealth. But that was by choice, not necessity. For years, I'd been building my tech company in secret, wanting to succeed or fail on my own merits without my family's influence. What had started in my tiny apartment bedroom had grown into something substantial, something I was fiercely proud of, with over 50 employees and recent acquisition offers that had made my head spin. No one in my family knew. I'd kept it separate, partly because I wanted independence, and partly because I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. Exactly what was happening now, even without that knowledge. That land was specifically left to me, I said carefully. Dad knew what he was doing when he made his will. Emma's expression hardened slightly. Dad didn't realize how things would turn out for me. He couldn't have known about the divorce, or how Philip would fight me on every penny. And he certainly couldn't have anticipated how well you're doing, my mother added. Your job at that tech company has been very stable. You don't have children to support. Your sister's needs are simply greater right now. The irony almost made me laugh. The job my mother referred to had been my cover story for years, a middle management position that explained my comfortable but modest lifestyle. In reality, I was the founder and CEO of Blue Matrix Solutions, a software company specializing in supply chain logistics that had revolutionized inventory management for mid-sized businesses. My stable job had made me a millionaire many times over. This isn't about needs, I said, feeling a familiar disappointment settle over me. This is about respecting Dad's wishes. Your father would want you to help your sister, my mother insisted, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she'd used throughout our childhood when ending discussions. Family comes first, Lily, always. I glanced between them, suddenly seeing the situation with painful clarity. They had decided this before I arrived. In their minds, this wasn't a discussion. It was a formality. They expected me to acquiesce, as I often had throughout my life, when faced with the united front of my mother and sister. I need to think about this, I said finally, buying myself time. Emma's face fell slightly. She had expected immediate agreement. There's really nothing to think about. You don't need the money, I do. It's that simple. It's not about money, I replied, feeling something shift inside me. It's about principle. Principles don't pay for your niece and nephew's education. Emma shot back, her vulnerability act slipping. Neither does your new SUV or those Louboutins you're wearing, I observed quietly. The room fell silent. My mother looked shocked that I'd noticed, or perhaps that I'd had the audacity to mention. That's not fair, Emma eventually said. My image is important for my work. I have to look successful, even when I'm struggling. Emma worked in real estate, where appearance certainly mattered, but her spending had always exceeded reasonable, professional requirements. While I drove a practical car and lived below my means, she maintained the facade of wealth at the expense of actual financial stability. I think we should table this discussion for now, my mother suggested, her tone indicating her disappointment in my reluctance. Lily, please just consider what we're asking. Your sister deserves this chance to get back on her feet. As I drove home that evening, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The familiar roads blurred before me as I replayed the conversation. The entitlement, the assumptions, the casual dismissal of my father's explicit wishes. For years, I'd kept my success separate from my family life, wanting validation that wasn't tied to financial achievement. I'd craved their respect for who I was, not what I owned. But as the highway stretched before me, I realized I'd been protecting people who wouldn't do the same for me. Maybe it was time the truth came out. Maybe it was time they learned that the daughter they thought needed to sacrifice for her struggling sister had built something more valuable than they could imagine. and had done it entirely on her own. The following week was a blur of activity at Blue Matrix. We were in the final stages of launching our new inventory prediction algorithm, something that had taken my team nearly 2 years to perfect. The office buzzed with the particular energy that comes with being on the verge of something revolutionary. To my employees, I was Lily Bennett, hands-on CEO who worked alongside them, not above them. Here, I wasn't the quiet, accommodating daughter, or the less favored sister. I was respected for my vision, my technical expertise, and my leadership. "The beta testing results are incredible," said Dominic, my chief technology officer, as we reviewed the data in the conference room. The wall of windows behind him revealed the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle visible in the distance through a rare break in the clouds. "Client satisfaction is at 98%. I've never seen numbers like this." I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. "The team deserves all the credit. They've poured everything into this project." "True, but they wouldn't have done it without your direction," Dominic countered. He'd been with me almost from the beginning, one of the few people who knew about my family situation, or lack thereof in my professional life. "Any word from Wentworth Capital about their acquisition offer?" I shook my head. "I've asked for some time to consider. $12 million is tempting, but you built this from nothing, and it's more than just a payday," he finished for me. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, what Blue Matrix represented to me. It wasn't just a successful company. It was proof that I could create something significant entirely on my own terms. No family connections, no inheritance to get started. Just hard work, vision, and persistence. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, Emma's name flashing on the screen. I silenced it. The third call from her I'd ignored this week. "Family?" Dominic asked, noticing my expression. "My sister," I confirmed. "Still trying to convince me to hand over my inheritance." Dominic shook his head. "When are you going to tell them about all this?" He gestured around us at the sleek office space that occupied half a floor in one of Seattle's premier business towers. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to prove I don't need their validation, but another part wants to see their faces when they realize what you've built while they've been underestimating you," he finished with a knowing grin. I laughed despite myself. "Is that petty?" "Human," he corrected. "Completely human." After the meeting, I retreated to my office to focus on the acquisition offer paperwork. The numbers were impressive. $12 million for a company I'd started in my apartment with nothing but a laptop and a concept. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister was pressuring me to give up land worth maybe $2 million at most, while I was considering an offer 6 times that amount. As I reviewed the terms, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my mother. "We need to discuss the land situation. Emma's meeting with a potential buyer tomorrow. Call me back." The presumption took my breath away. They were already meeting with buyers for land that wasn't theirs to sell. The familiar feeling of being overlooked, of having my boundaries ignored, washed over me. Throughout my childhood and early adulthood, this dynamic had played out countless times. Emma wanted something, my mother supported her, and I was expected to go along with it. "Not this time," I murmured to myself, putting the phone aside without responding. Instead, I pulled up the document I'd been working on in private. Moments. A detailed analysis of my father's commercial land and its potential. Unlike my sister, who just saw dollar signs, I'd been researching what could actually be done with the property. Its location at the growing edge of our hometown made it valuable not just for immediate sale, but as a long-term investment. The EWAM city's development plan showed expansion in that direction over the next decade. Roads would be improved, utilities extended. Property values would likely double again. But more than that, I saw potential for something meaningful, something that would honor my father's legacy better than a quick sale ever could. My father had always spoken of that land with a particular pride. This has been in our family for generations, he'd told me once as we walked its perimeter together. I've held on to it because I believe it will matter someday, not just for its value, but for what it could become. At the time, I hadn't fully understood, but now, with years of business experience behind me, I did. It wasn't just a plot of land. It was an opportunity to create something lasting. I was deep in these thoughts when my assistant, Nora, knocked on my door. "Your 4 o'clock is here," she reminded me. "Thanks, Nora. Give me just a minute." After she left, I closed the land documents and took a deep breath, shifting my focus back to Blue Matrix. But the land, and what it represented, lingered in the back of my mind. That evening, I drove home to my apartment in the hip Capitol Hill neighborhood. It was modest by CEO standards. A 2-bedroom in a converted historic building with exposed brick walls and large windows. I could have afforded much more, but this place felt like me, understated but with character, practical but with touches of carefully chosen luxury. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto my small balcony, looking out at the city lights. Seattle had been my home for 8 years now, ever since I'd left my hometown with a computer science degree and ambition burning in my chest. The distance had been intentional, far enough that visits home were events rather than regular occurrences, close enough that I could still reach my family when needed. My phone rang again, and this time I answered, expecting Emma or my mother. Instead, it was my father's longtime friend and attorney, Harold. "Lily, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, his voice carrying the particular gravitas of a man who had practiced law for over 40 years. "Not at all, Harold. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. "I'm not sure, to be honest. Your sister came to see me today with your mother. They were asking about the procedure for contesting your father's will." I sank into my balcony chair, the city view blurring before me. "They what?" "They seem to think there might be grounds to challenge the allocation of the commercial property," he continued. "They suggested your father might not have been of sound mind when he made his final arrangements." The accusation made my blood boil. My father had been sharp until the end, his mind untouched by the cancer that had ravaged his body. For them to suggest otherwise was not just insulting, it was a desecration of his memory. "That's absurd," I said tightly. "Dad knew exactly what he was doing." "I agree completely," Harold assured me, "and I told them as much. The will is airtight, Lily. Thomas was very specific about his wishes, and we documented everything meticulously. But I thought you should know they're considering this route." "Thank you for telling me," I managed, my mind racing. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. They were willing to claim my father had been mentally incompetent just to get their hands on the land. The depth of their entitlement, their willingness to tarnish his memory for financial gain, struck me as a betrayal far worse than I'd imagined. In that moment, something hardened within me. The last threads of my hesitation about confronting them snapped. They needed to understand exactly who they were dealing with, not the compliant daughter and sister they thought they knew, but the woman who had built a multi-million-dollar company through sheer determination and intelligence. I opened my laptop and booked a flight home for the weekend. It was time for them to learn the truth. The flight home gave me 5 hours to strategize. As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, I found myself rehearsing different versions of the conversation to come. Should I reveal everything at once? Start with subtle hints? Present documentation of my company's success? Each scenario played out differently in my mind, but all ended with the same image. My mother and sister finally seeing me, truly seeing me, for perhaps the first time. When I landed Friday evening, I rented a car rather than asking anyone to pick me up. The autonomy felt important. I checked into the Riverdale Hotel downtown instead of staying at my mother's house as I normally would. The surprise visit was tactical. I'd texted only that I'd be in town for the weekend and wanted to meet to resolve the inheritance situation. Words I knew would ensure their attendance. Saturday morning, I woke early and went for a run through Westridge Park, the sprawling green space where I'd spent countless hours as a child. The familiar paths helped clear my head, the rhythm of my footfalls on packed earth grounding me in my purpose. By the time I returned to my hotel room to shower and prepare, I felt centered and resolute. I had arranged to meet them at a private room in Castellanos, an upscale restaurant where business meetings often took place. Neutral territory where we would all be compelled to maintain certain decorum. I arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in what Dominic called my CEO armor. A perfectly tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and the subtle ruby earrings that had been my first significant purchase after Blue Matrix turned profitable. The maitre d' showed me to the reserved room, a tastefully appointed space with a round table set for 3. A bottle of sparkling water already chilling in a silver bucket. "Will there be anything else, Ms. Bennett?" he asked. "No, thank you." "This is perfect." When my mother and Emma arrived precisely at noon, their expressions revealed immediate confusion. They had expected the usual Lily, casual, accommodating, eager to smooth over family tensions. Instead, they found me in business attire, composed, and professional, already seated at the head of the table with a leather portfolio in front of me. "Lily?" my mother said, hesitating at the doorway. "What is all this?" "Please sit down," I replied, gesturing to the chairs. "I've ordered a bottle of the Chardonnay you like, Mom. It should be here momentarily." They exchanged glances but took their seats. Emma looked particularly uncomfortable, dressed in her real estate agent best, clearly expecting to present herself as the sophisticated professional to my bohemian tech worker. "You said you wanted to discuss the inheritance," Emma began, cutting straight to her priority. "I do," I confirmed. "But first, I'd like to talk about Dad." My mother's expression softened slightly. "What about him, dear?" "About his mental state when he made his will." My voice remained calm, but I allowed an edge of steel to enter it. "Harold called me. He told me you're planning to contest the will by claiming Dad wasn't of sound mind." Emma had the grace to look momentarily abashed before her features hardened. "We're exploring our options. The distribution wasn't fair, given my current circumstances." "Dad was perfectly lucid until the end," I said quietly. "You know that. We all do." "People with terminal illnesses often experience confusion," my mother countered, her tone gentle but firm. "Your father wasn't himself in those last months." The waiter arrived with the wine, momentarily pausing our conversation. After he'd poured and departed, I looked directly at my mother. "That's a lie," I said simply, "and we both know it. Dad's mind was sharp until the last week. He discussed business with me 3 days before he finalized his will." "Business?" Emma scoffed. "What would Dad discuss with you about business? You work in middle management at a tech company. He built his construction firm from nothing." The perfect opening. I took a sip of water, allowing the moment to stretch. "That's not entirely accurate," I finally said. My mother frowned. "What do you mean, Lily?" I opened the leather portfolio and withdrew several glossy pages, printouts from business publications, featuring Blue Matrix, articles about our innovative approach to inventory management, and a highlighted copy of the acquisition offer letter. "I don't work in middle management," I said, sliding the pages across the table. "I founded and currently serve as CEO of Blue Matrix Solutions. We're a software company that specializes in supply chain logistics. Last year, our revenue exceeded $8 million. Last month, we received an acquisition offer for $12 million. The silence that followed was profound. My mother picked up the nearest article, her eyes widening as she read. Emma flipped through the papers more frantically, landing on the Wait See acquisition letter with its unmistakable figures. "This can't be right," Emma said finally. You've never mentioned any of this. No, I haven't, I agreed. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own merits. I didn't want family connections or expectations influencing my path. But how? My mother asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. How did you manage this without any of us knowing? The same way I've done most things in my life, I replied evenly. Quietly, thoroughly, and without seeking approval or recognition. Emma was still staring at the acquisition letter, her expression a complex mix of disbelief and calculation. $12 million, she murmured. That's the current offer, I confirmed. We're still negotiating terms. My mother finally looked up from the article she'd been reading. I don't understand why you kept this from us, Lily. We're your family. Are we? I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. Because family doesn't try to manipulate each other. Family doesn't attempt to invalidate a father's final wishes by questioning his sanity. Family doesn't assume one sibling should sacrifice for another without all the facts. Emma's face flushed. That's not fair. I didn't know about any of this. Would it have mattered if you did? I challenged. Or would you still have expected me to give up my inheritance because you've made poor financial choices despite having every advantage? Lily, my mother interjected, her tone warning. There's no need to be unkind. I'm not being unkind, Mom. I'm being honest. Perhaps for the first time in our relationship. I took another sip of water, gathering my thoughts. This wasn't just about revealing my success. It was about addressing the fundamental imbalance that had defined our family dynamics for as long as I could remember. I never wanted to turn this into a competition, I continued, my voice softer. I've never cared about having more than Emma or being more successful. What I've cared about is being respected, having my choices and boundaries honored, and being treated as an equal member of this family. Of course we respect you, my mother insisted, though her eyes kept darting to the business articles spread across the table, as if reevaluating everything she thought she knew about her younger daughter. Your actions suggest otherwise, I countered. When Emma wanted my inheritance, you both assumed I should give it up without question. You didn't ask about my financial situation or my plans for the land. You just decided I should sacrifice because that's what I've always done. Emma leaned forward, her expression shifting to one I recognized well, the calculated charm she employed when trying to get her way. Lily, this is amazing, truly. You've built something incredible, and we're both so proud of you. But surely, now you can understand why the land doesn't matter as much to you as it does to me? With your company's success, you don't need— Stop, I interrupted, raising my hand. This isn't about need. It's about respect. Dad left that land to me because he trusted me with it. He knew I would honor his vision for it. What vision? My mother asked, genuine curiosity in her voice for perhaps the first time in our conversation. I pulled out another document from my portfolio, the development plan I'd been working on. Dad and I talked about the land several times in his final months, I explained. He didn't just see it as an asset to be liquidated. He saw potential for something lasting. I've been developing a proposal to turn the property into a mixed-use development with affordable housing units, small business incubation spaces, and a community center named after him. I passed the document to my mother, who began reviewing it with growing interest. This would cost millions to develop, she observed. Yes, I acknowledged. Money I now have access to. Dad knew I was building something significant, even if he didn't know the details. He was the only one who ever asked about my work with genuine interest, who believed I might be capable of more than everyone assumed. As the weight of my words settled over the table, I saw something shift in my mother's expression, a dawning realization that perhaps she had never truly known her younger daughter at all. Emma, however, remained focused on the financial implications. So you're saying you won't sell the land, even though you clearly don't need the money? That's right, I confirmed. I'm not selling. I'm developing it according to Dad's vision and mine. That's, Emma began, but seemed unable to find the right word to express her frustration without revealing her self-interest too nakedly. That's my decision, I finished for her, as the legal owner of the property. The remainder of our lunch proceeded with strained politeness. My mother asked careful questions about Blue Matrix, how I'd started it, what our software actually did, how many people I employed. Her interest seemed genuine if belated. Emma, meanwhile, barely touched her food, her mind visibly racing behind her composed expression. I recognized the look. She was recalculating her approach, searching for a new angle now that her initial strategy had failed. As the waiter cleared our plates, Emma finally spoke up. Lily, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Obviously, we had no idea about your situation. She gestured vaguely at the business documents now neatly returned to my portfolio. It changes things. Does it? I asked, deliberately keeping my tone neutral. How so? Well, she said, leaning forward with the conspiratorial air she often adopted when trying to create a sense of alliance. Now we can approach this as equal business partners. Your company expertise, my real estate knowledge, we could develop that land together. Make it a family project. The suggestion was so transparent that I might have laughed if it weren't so typical of our dynamic. Emma always positioning herself to benefit from others' success without having done the work. Herself. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I already have a development team in place. Professional urban planners who specialize in community-focused projects. Emma's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. So you're cutting family out of the opportunity entirely? I'm proceeding with the vision Dad and I discussed, I corrected. This isn't about excluding anyone. It's about honoring his wishes with the right expertise. My mother placed her hand on Emma's arm, a subtle signal for her to back down. Lily, what your sister means is that we're just trying to understand your plans. This is all very sudden for us. I know, I acknowledged, and I'm sorry for the secrecy, but surely you can understand why I kept my professional life separate, given how our family dynamics have played out over the years. My mother had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable at that. Perhaps we should all take some time to process this new information, she suggested. It's a lot to take in. We parted ways outside the restaurant, my mother embracing me with what felt like genuine warmth for the first time in years. I'm proud of you, she whispered, surprising me. Your father always said you had a quiet strength that would surprise us all someday. Emma's goodbye was more perfunctory, a quick hug and a promise to call soon that we both knew was empty. As I watched them walk to their car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at having finally revealed my truth. Sadness for the years of connection we'd lost to misunderstanding, and wariness about what might come next. Emma wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. I spent the rest of the afternoon visiting the land that had sparked this entire conflict. The 12 acres sat at the junction of old farmland and the expanding edge of town, with mature oak trees, lining the northern boundary and a small stream cutting through the eastern corner. Development had crept steadily closer over the years, with a new shopping center visible from the highest point of the property. Standing there, I could see both what it was and what it could become. My father had acquired it piece by piece over decades, patiently assembling a parcel large enough to matter. Land is the one thing they're not making any more of, Lily, he'd told me once. If you're patient enough, it always becomes valuable. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold. How did it go? Are you free to stop by the office? Harold's law office occupied the second floor of a historic building downtown, its interior a comforting mix of modern efficiency and old-world charm. Leather chairs, digital displays, and the subtle scent of books and furniture polish. He greeted me with a warm handshake, his expression openly curious. "I take it from your mother's call that your meeting was eventful," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "My mother called you?" I asked, surprised. He nodded, settling behind his desk. "About an hour ago. She had some questions about your father's discussions regarding the land. Specifically, whether he had mentioned any development plans to me." I felt a surge of validation. My mother was fact-checking, taking my claims seriously rather than dismissing them outright. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," Harold said simply. "That Thomas had indeed spoken to me about his hopes for the property. That he believed you would be the one to realize its potential, given your business acumen. His words, not mine. Though I now understand them better." He gave me a pointed look. "Your secret is out, I take it?" I nodded. It was time. "Good," he said with satisfaction. "Thomas would be pleased. He never said anything specific, out of respect for your privacy, but he hinted more than once that you were building something significant. Said he recognized in you the same determination he'd had when starting his own company." This was news to me. "He knew?" "He suspected," Harold clarified. He was very proud, even without knowing the details. The knowledge that my father had seen me, truly seen me, even when I thought I was keeping secrets, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away quickly, but not before Harold noticed. "He loved you both equally, you know," he said, gently. "But he understood that you and Emma needed different things from him. Emma needed constant reassurance. You needed space to grow and prove yourself." We spent the next hour discussing the legal aspects of my development plans. Harold had already reviewed the preliminary proposal I'd sent him weeks earlier and offered valuable insights about local zoning regulations and community board priorities. As we wrapped up, he handed me a sealed envelope. "Thomas asked me to give you this if the land ever became a point of contention," he explained. He anticipated that Emma might struggle with his decision. I stared at the envelope, my father's handwriting instantly recognizable, my name written in his neat architectural lettering. "Thank you," I managed, tucking it carefully into my bag. Outside, the afternoon had given way to early evening. The streets of my hometown quieter now as shops closed and restaurants prepared for the dinner rush. I walked aimlessly, processing everything that had happened, before finding myself at Riverside Park where my father had often taken me as a child. I found a bench overlooking the water and finally opened his letter. The paper felt substantial. Between my fingers, my father's preference for quality evident even in this small detail. "My dear Lily, if you're reading this, then the land has become a source of discord, as I feared it might. I want you to know that my decision to leave it to you was made with complete clarity of mind and purpose. You've always been the quiet one, the mediator, the peacekeeper in our family. Too often, that role has meant your own desires and needs were overlooked. Emma has a wonderful heart, but has never quite learned to stand on her own feet. Your mother, God bless her, has always found it easier to give in to the louder voice, rather than listen for the quieter wisdom. The land represents possibility. Lily, not just financial opportunity, but the chance to create something lasting, something that reflects values. I know we share community, sustainability, purpose beyond profit. Whatever you decide to do with it, sell it, develop it, preserve it, know that I trust your judgment completely. You've always had a vision that extends beyond the immediate, a patience that sees the longer arc of possibility. I've watched you build your life with intentionality and quiet determination. I may not know all the details. You've kept your cards close and I've respected that privacy, but I recognize the focused purpose in your eyes. It's the same look I had when building my own dream. Be brave enough to stand your ground, Lily. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your vision deserves to be realized. The land is yours because I believe in what you will do with it, not because I love you more or Emma less. With pride and love, Dad. By the time I finished reading, tears flowed freely down my face. Not from sadness, but from profound recognition. My father had seen me completely, in ways I hadn't fully realized. He had given me the land not despite my quiet nature, but because of it. Because he trusted the careful, thoughtful way I approached everything in my life. As the sun began to set over the river, casting golden light across the water, I made a decision. I would proceed with the development plans, creating something that honored not just my father's memory, but the values we shared. And I would do it unapologetically, no longer hiding my success or diminishing my achievements to make others comfortable. My phone buzzed again, Emma calling. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for whatever new approach she might attempt. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face the next phase of this family drama. Tonight was for sitting with my father's words, for allowing myself to feel fully seen and understood by him, even if that understanding had come too late for us to share it in person. The river flowed steadily onward, unchanging yet never the same from moment to moment. Like family bonds, I thought, constant yet evolving, shaped by currents both seen and unseen. The water caught the last rays of sunlight, transformed briefly into ribbons of fire before fading into twilight blue. I tucked my father's letter carefully back into my bag and rose from the bench, feeling both lighter and more grounded than I had in years. Whatever came next, I would face it with the quiet strength my father had recognized in me all along. I returned to Seattle the following day with renewed purpose, my father's letter safely tucked into the inner pocket of my laptop bag. The flight gave me time to reflect on next steps, both for Blue Matrix and for the development project back home. By the time we touched down at SeaTac, I had sketched out a rough timeline and identified the key decisions that needed to be made. Monday morning, I gathered my executive team for a meeting I'd been postponing for weeks. The acquisition offer from Wentworth Capital deserved serious consideration, but I needed to be certain about my vision for both Blue Matrix and the land development before moving forward. I've decided to decline Wentworth's offer, I announced, after summarizing the weekend's events. Dominic raised an eyebrow but didn't look surprised. Vivian, our CFO, looked less convinced. $12 million is significantly above market value, Lily, she pointed out. Their eagerness suggests they see potential we might be underestimating. Or they recognize what we've built has value beyond the immediate financials, I countered. The technology we've developed for inventory prediction has applications we've only begun to explore. Dominic leaned forward. You're thinking about the land development project. I nodded. The software we built to manage supply chains could be adapted to coordinate sustainable community development. Imagine applying our prediction algorithms to energy usage, resource distribution, community needs assessment. You want to pivot the company? Vivian asked, her expression carefully neutral. Not pivot, expand, I clarified. Our core business remains supply chain management software, but I want to create a subsidiary focused on smart community development, using our existing technology as the foundation. The discussion that followed was robust, with legitimate concerns raised about resource allocation, market positioning, and the challenges of entering a new sector. But by the end of the 2-hour meeting, a tentative consensus had emerged. We would counter Wentworth's acquisition offer with a proposal for strategic investment instead, funding that would allow us to create the new division while maintaining control of the company. I'll need you to lead the core business operations more directly, I told Dominic afterward. I'll be splitting my time between Seattle and back home until the development project is properly launched. You're sure about this? He asked. It's a lot to take on, especially with your family situation still unresolved. I'm sure, I said, thinking of my father's letter. This feels right, combining what I've built here with his legacy there, creating something meaningful from both. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into detailed planning. I hired an architect who specialized in sustainable community design, retained a local urban planning consultant, and began preliminary discussions with the town council about zoning variances we would need. The project was ambitious: a mixed-use development featuring affordable housing, green spaces, small business incubators, and a community center that would offer educational programs focused on technology and entrepreneurship. I returned to my Maudiyai hometown every other weekend, staying at the Riverdale Hotel rather than my mother's house. Maintaining professional boundaries seemed important as the project took shape. My mother had reached out several times, her tone more respectful than I could ever remember. She seemed genuinely interested in my plans for the land, even offering to introduce me to several influential council members she knew through her volunteer work. Emma, however, remained conspicuously silent for nearly a month. I knew better than to believe she had accepted the situation. Her absence from family discussions about the project likely meant she was plotting a new approach. I didn't have to wait long to find out what it was. It was a Thursday evening in early autumn when I received an unexpected call from Brady Sullivan, the mayor of our hometown and an old family friend. "Lily, hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," he began, his typically jovial voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Not at all, Brady. What can I do for you?" There was a pause. "Well, it's about your development proposal. I've been approached by another interested party who has concerns about the project's direction." My grip tightened on the phone. "Let me guess. My sister?" "Emma did reach out, yes," he confirmed. "She's suggesting that the development might not be in line with your father's wishes for the community. She's gathered some support from neighbors who are worried about increased traffic and changes to the area's character." It was a clever move, I had to admit. Emma knew she couldn't challenge the inheritance directly, so she was attempting to create political obstacles instead, using community concerns as a proxy for her own interests. "Brady, I'd be happy to meet with any concerned residents," I offered. "The project is designed specifically to enhance the community, not disrupt it. We've incorporated substantial green space, traffic mitigation measures, and architectural elements that complement the existing neighborhood." "That's good to hear," he said, sounding relieved. "Actually, there's a town council meeting next Tuesday. It might be helpful if you could present your plans directly. Address some of these concerns head on." "I'll be there," I promised. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline as dusk settled over the city. Emma's opposition wasn't surprising, but it stung nonetheless. She was willing to derail a project that could genuinely benefit our hometown, simply because she wasn't controlling it or profiting from it directly. The thought brought with it an unexpected clarity. This wasn't really about the land anymore, or even about money. It was about control, about Emma's need to be centered in every family narrative. Throughout our lives, she had been the protagonist of our family's story, with my mother, father, and I cast in supporting roles. My success, both with Blue Matrix and with the development project, challenged that established order. I spent the weekend preparing for the council meeting, refining my presentation to address the specific concerns Brady had mentioned. By Tuesday, I had a comprehensive proposal ready, complete with traffic studies, environmental impact assessments, and architectural renderings that showed how the development would integrate with the existing community aesthetic. When I arrived at the town hall that evening, I was surprised by the turnout. Nearly 100 people filled the chamber, a significantly larger crowd than the usual attendance for council meetings. I spotted my mother sitting near the back, her expression unreadable. Emma sat in the front row, immaculately dressed and surrounded by people I recognized as some of the more influential property owners in town. Brady called the meeting to order, explaining that while no formal vote would take place that evening, the council wanted to hear community perspectives on the proposed development. As the landowner and project lead, I would present first, followed by community comments. Taking my place at the podium, I felt a momentary flutter of nerves. Public speaking had never been my favorite activity, but years of leading a company had taught me to channel that nervous energy into focused passion. I launched into my presentation, outlining the vision for what we were now calling Bennett Commons in honor of my father. "This isn't just about building structures," I explained, gesturing to the renderings displayed on the large screen behind me. "It's about creating connections between people, between businesses, between the past we honor and the future we're building together." My father believed in this community. He believed in its potential to grow while maintaining the character and values that make it special. I detailed the environmental considerations, the affordable housing component, the incubator spaces for local entrepreneurs, and the community center that would offer technology education for all ages. The presentation was comprehensive but concise, ending with a clear invitation for questions and feedback. The room was silent for a moment after I finished. Then Brady opened the floor for comments. The first few speakers were supportive. A local teacher excited about the educational opportunities. A young couple struggling to find affordable housing in a market increasingly dominated by luxury developments. A small business owner who saw potential in the incubator concept. Then, Emma rose, making her way to the microphone with the confident stride of someone used to commanding attention. "While my sister's presentation is certainly impressive," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I feel compelled to speak as someone who knew our father's intentions intimately. Thomas Bennett was a traditionalist at heart. He valued stability and preservation over flashy development." She turned slightly to address me directly rather than the council. "Lily, I know you believe you're honoring Dad's legacy, but this project, with its modern architecture and emphasis on technology, feels more like a monument to your company than a reflection of his values." The calculated nature of her attack was breathtaking. She was positioning herself as the true keeper of our father's legacy while painting me as an outsider, imposing alien values on our hometown. It was manipulative, misleading, and potentially effective with those who didn't know better. Several of Emma's supporters spoke next, echoing her concerns about changing the character of the neighborhood, increasing traffic, and attracting outsiders who wouldn't share the community's traditional values. The momentum of the meeting seemed to be shifting. Just as I prepared to request time for rebuttal, an unexpected voice spoke up from the back of the room. "I'd like to say something, if I may." My mother stood, her slender figure straight and dignified. Brady nodded, gesturing for her to approach the microphone. As she walked down the center aisle, her eyes met mine briefly, something apologetic and determined in her gaze. The room fell silent as my mother reached the microphone. She looked different somehow, more present, more substantial than the woman who had so often faded into the background of family conflicts, deferring to whoever spoke loudest. She smoothed her jacket, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood, before addressing the crowd. "My name is Eleanor Bennett," she began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "I'm Thomas Bennett's widow and mother to both Lily and Emma." She paused, looking around the room at the familiar faces of neighbors and friends. "I've lived in this town for over 40 years. Tom and I raised our daughters here, built our lives here. So I understand the concerns about preserving what makes this community special." She nodded toward several of the residents who had spoken in opposition to the project. "Change can be frightening, especially when it involves something as visible and significant as this development." Emma shifted in her front row seat, her expression a mixture of confusion and growing wariness. This clearly wasn't the supportive commentary she had expected from our mother. "But I feel I need to clarify something important," my mother continued, "about Tom's values and his vision for this land." She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded paper that I immediately recognized as similar to the letter I'd received. My father's stationery, his distinctive handwriting visible even from where I sat. "My husband wrote this to me shortly before he passed away," she explained. "He knew there might be disagreements about his decisions. He wanted me to understand his reasoning. She unfolded the paper carefully and began to read. Eleanor, I know you worry about fairness between our girls. You've always tried to balance things so perfectly, to make sure neither felt slighted. It's one of the countless reasons I've loved you all these years. My mother's voice wavered slightly before she continued. The land goes to Lily not because I favor her, but because she sees what it could be, not just its monetary value, but its potential to create something meaningful. Emma has many gifts, but patience and long-term vision have never been among them. She sees immediate opportunities. Lily sees possibilities that may take years to realize. Emma's face flushed deep red, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. Several of her supporters glanced at her uncomfortably. I've watched Lily build something remarkable in her own quiet way, my mother read on. She never speaks of it, but a father notices things. The late-night calls she steps away to take, the technical journals she reads, the way she analyzes problems with the same methodical approach I used when building my business. My throat tightened with emotion. Even with the letter Harold had given me, hearing this additional confirmation of my father's perceptiveness, his faith in me even when I thought I was keeping secrets, felt profoundly validating. Trust Lily's judgment, Eleanor. Help Emma understand that this isn't about loving one daughter more than the other. It's about entrusting the right resource to the right steward. My mother folded the letter carefully and looked directly at the council members. I've seen the plans for Bennett Commons, she said. They honor exactly what Tom valued most: community, opportunity, sustainability, and looking beyond immediate gain to create something lasting. Whether the architecture is traditional or modern wasn't what mattered to him. What mattered was creating something that would serve people for generations to come. She turned slightly to face where Emma sat rigidly in the front row. Emma, your father loved you deeply. He admired your social intelligence, your ability to connect with people, your determination. But he knew, and I think you know too, that you and Lily approach life very differently. He made his decision not to hurt you, but to ensure his legacy would be stewarded in the way he believed was best. The silence in the room was absolute as my mother returned to her seat. Brady cleared his throat, clearly trying to find the right words to move the meeting forward after such an unexpected and personal moment. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett, he said finally. Would anyone else like to speak? Several hands went up, but Emma was already on her feet, striding toward the exit. She pushed through the double doors without looking back, the heavy thud of their closing punctuating her departure. The remainder of the meeting took on a different tone. While some residents still expressed concerns about specific aspects of the project, traffic patterns, construction disruption, architectural details, the fundamental challenge to my right to develop the land had evaporated with my mother's testimony. By the meeting's end, I had agreed to several reasonable modifications to address community concerns. Brady and the council members seemed satisfied with the compromises, scheduling a formal vote for the following month that would allow the project to move forward if approved. As the crowd dispersed, I made my way to where my mother sat, still, holding my father's letter in her hands. Thank you, I said simply, taking the seat beside her. She smiled, a tired but genuine expression. I should have spoken up long ago, Lily. Not just tonight, but all those years when I let Emma's voice drown out yours. When I assumed your quietness meant you needed less attention, less support. Why now? I asked gently. She sighed, smoothing the letter with her fingertips. After our lunch, I couldn't stop thinking about how little I knew about your life, your real life, not the version you presented to the family. It made me wonder what else I might have missed by never looking beneath the surface. She described visiting Harold's office, asking pointed questions about my father's final wishes, and finally receiving the letter she'd read aloud. Tom and I didn't always communicate well about difficult things, she admitted. He tried to tell me that you were building something significant, but I didn't really understand. I just assumed he meant you were doing well at your job. You couldn't have known, I assured her. I could have asked, she countered. I could have shown genuine interest in your work, your dreams, your vision, the way I always did with Emma. I failed you there, Lily, and I'm sorry. The simplicity of her apology, free from excuses or deflections, took me by surprise. My mother had always been loving but rarely introspective about her parenting or the family dynamics she helped create. What about Emma? I asked, glancing toward the doors through which my sister had departed. My mother's expression grew troubled. Emma has always struggled with sharing attention, with not being at the center of every family narrative. It's partly our fault, her father's and mine. We catered to her needs so consistently that she came to expect it. Do you think she'll ever accept this? I gestured around us, indicating both the development project and the larger shift in family dynamics it represented. I don't know, she answered honestly. Emma processes disappointment through anger first. She'll need time. We walked out together into the cool evening air, the town hall emptying behind us. As we reached the parking lot, my mother paused. Would you consider staying at the house tonight instead of the hotel? I'd like to hear more about your company, about the life you've built in Seattle. Really hear it this time. The invitation felt significant, not just practical hospitality, but a genuine reaching across the distance that had grown between us over years of misunderstanding. I agreed, following her home in my rental car. That night, sitting in the kitchen where I'd grown up, I told my mother the full story of Blue Matrix, the early struggles, the breakthrough algorithm, the growing pains and triumphs of building a successful company. She listened with an attentiveness I couldn't remember experiencing from her before, asking thoughtful questions that showed she was truly engaging with the substance of my work. You remind me so much of your father, she said during a lull in the conversation. Not just your determination, but the way you see systems, how things fit together. He could walk into a half-built structure and immediately visualize the finished building, understand how each component contributed to the whole. I smiled, feeling the weight of her words. That's the highest compliment you could give me. It's the truth, she replied simply. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. When I finally went to bed in my old room, surrounded by the relics of my teenage years, I felt something shift into place. A piece of myself that had been hanging slightly askew for decades finally settling into proper alignment. My mother might never fully understand the technical aspects of my work, but she was trying to see me clearly for perhaps the first time. It was a beginning. The next morning over breakfast, we discussed practical next steps for both the Bennett Commons project and our family relationships. I'd like to be involved, my mother offered tentatively. Not in the business aspects, that's far outside my expertise, but perhaps with the community center planning? I've been involved with local education initiatives for years. I might have useful perspectives to offer. I'd welcome that, I said sincerely. The center is meant to be a true community resource. Having someone who deeply understands this town's needs would be invaluable. Her face brightened with genuine enthusiasm. I could help coordinate with the schools, set up mentorship programs. There are so many talented young people here with limited access to technology education. As we collaborated on ideas, I found myself appreciating sides of my mother I'd rarely seen. Her organizational skills, her network of community connections, her genuine commitment to education. We were connecting as adults, as collaborators, in a way we never had when I was growing up. The elephant in the room, of course, was Emma. Neither of us had heard from her since her dramatic exit from the town hall meeting. Should I reach out to her? I asked as we cleared the breakfast dishes. My mother considered the question carefully. Give her a little space first. Emma's never handled public challenges well, and last night was significant. Let her process it. When you do reach out, focus on collaboration rather than the conflict. I nodded, appreciating the insight. As much as Emma's behavior had hurt and frustrated me over the years, she was still my sister. The prospect of permanent estrangement wasn't something I wanted, even if our relationship needed dramatic recalibration. The weeks that followed were some of the busiest and most productive of my life. With the town council's approval secured, unanimous vote that came through exactly as Brady had predicted, Bennett Commons moved from concept to actual development. I established a local office in my hometown, hiring a small team to oversee the project while I balanced responsibilities between there and Blue Matrix headquarters in Seattle. Dominic stepped up admirably at Blue Matrix, allowing me to focus significant attention on the development. Our strategic partnership with Wentworth Capital had been finalized. Not an acquisition, but an investment that gave us the capital to launch our new community development division while maintaining control of the company's direction. You should have seen their faces when I countered their $12 million acquisition offer with a request for strategic investment instead, I told my mother over dinner during one of my weekly visits home. They thought I was negotiating for a higher purchase price. It took them a minute to realize I wasn't interested in selling at all. My mother laughed, a sound I'd been hearing more frequently as our relationship evolved. Your father did the same thing once, early in his career. A larger construction firm tried to buy him out. Instead, he convinced them to become his first major client. These casual mentions of my father had become common between us, not weighted with grief or used as emotional leverage, but simple observations that helped us both keep his memory alive in everyday moments. It felt healing, a more authentic form of remembrance than formal mourning had ever provided. My mother had thrown herself into the community center planning with surprising energy. Her connections throughout the town had proven invaluable, and her understanding of local needs helped shape the educational programs we were developing. Working together had revealed dimensions of her I'd never fully appreciated: her organizational skills, her diplomatic capabilities when navigating community politics, her genuine commitment to creating opportunities for local youth. We should consider adding a music program, she suggested one evening as we reviewed floor plans. The high school's arts budget was cut again last year. Having a space where students could access instruments and recording equipment would fill a real need. I made a note, impressed by her practical vision. That's a great idea. We could partner with that music store downtown. What's it called? Rhythm House, she supplied. Brady's nephew actually runs it now. I'm sure they'd be interested in providing instruction if we supply the space and equipment. These collaborative sessions had become a highlight of my visits home, bridging the gap between my professional and personal lives in ways I'd never thought possible. After years of keeping my worlds separate, there was something deeply satisfying about bringing them together, about working alongside my mother as equal partners in creating something meaningful. The only shadow over this productive period was Emma's continued silence. Despite several attempts to reach out, calls, texts, even a handwritten note, she remained determinedly uncommunicative. My mother had occasional contact with her, brief conversations focused primarily on my niece and nephew, but even those were strained and superficial. Give her time, my mother advised. Emma's pride was hurt publicly. That's always been difficult for her. While I understood the wisdom in this patience, Emma's silence created practical complications. Her real estate expertise could have been valuable to the project, creating an opportunity for her to be meaningfully involved. More importantly, her continued absence affected her children, who didn't fully understand why family gatherings had suddenly become so fragmented. Aunt Lily, why doesn't Mom ever come when you're here? My 11-year-old niece Zoe asked during a Sunday afternoon visit to my mother's house. Her perceptiveness caught me off guard. Your mom and I are working through some grown-up disagreements, I explained carefully. But that doesn't change how much we both love you and your brother. Zoe considered this with the solemn thoughtfulness that reminded me so much of my father. Is it about Grandpa's land? Mom was really mad about that. It's complicated, I hedged, not wanting to put her in the middle of adult conflicts. But I'm hoping we can work it out soon. The truth was, I missed my sister, not the recent version who had tried to manipulate me out of my inheritance, but the Emma I'd known in childhood, before competition and comparison had corroded our connection. Despite our differences, we shared a history, an understanding of each other that came from growing up in the same household, witnessing the same family dynamics from different angles. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Jacob, my 8-year-old nephew, had developed an intense interest in architecture after seeing the Bennett Commons renderings on my tablet during a family dinner. His enthusiasm was contagious, his questions insightful even for a child his age. "Can I see where they're building it?" he asked one afternoon, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mom said it's where Grandpa's old land is, but I don't remember what it looks like." I glanced at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. "I think that would be fine, as long as your mom doesn't mind." Jacob's face fell slightly. "She probably won't want to go." "Why don't I ask her?" I suggested, seizing the opportunity. "This is about you seeing something that interests you. Adults can set aside their disagreements for that." To my surprise, when I texted Emma about taking Jacob to see the construction site, she responded almost immediately. That would be good for him. He hasn't stopped talking about buildings since. He saw your plans. I can drop him off Saturday morning. Her response, while cool and practical, was the first direct communication we'd had in nearly 2 months. I took it as a positive sign, a small crack in the wall of silence she'd constructed. Saturday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunshine, and leaves beginning to turn vibrant shades of red and gold. I'd arranged for the site foreman to give us a special tour, complete with hard hats and safety vests, sized for both adults and children. When Emma's SUV pulled into my mother's driveway, I braced myself for a tense handoff. Instead, Emma emerged from the driver's side, dressed casually in jeans and a light jacket. "Mind if I join?" she asked. Her tone carefully neutral. "Jacob's been so excited about this, I thought I should see what all the fuss is about." I masked my surprise with a smile. "Of course. We've got extra safety gear." Jacob bounced between us, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, as he chattered about the excavator he hoped to see in action. My mother watched from the porch, her expression cautiously hopeful as we loaded into my rental car. The drive to the construction site was filled with Jacob's enthusiastic questions, creating a buffer that made the silence between Emma and me less uncomfortable. As we parked near the temporary construction office, I noticed Emma studying the landscape with professional interest. "It's got good elevation," she observed as we walked toward the foreman's trailer. "The views from the upper floors will be impressive." "That's what Dad always said," I replied, encouraged by her neutral commentary. He thought it was one of the property's best features. Emma nodded but said nothing more as we met with Hector, the foreman, who delighted Jacob with his extensive knowledge of construction equipment and processes. As our tour progressed, moving from the foundation work for the community center to the area marked for the first residential units, I noticed Emma's expression gradually shift from neutral observation to genuine interest. "You're incorporating a lot of green space," she noted as Hector showed us the landscaping plans. "More than most developments would allocate." "It was important to Dad," I said. "He always talked about balancing growth with preservation." Emma's eyes met mine briefly, something unreadable flickering in her expression before she returned her attention to Jacob, who was asking Hector detailed questions about how the geothermal heating system would work. The tour concluded with a visit to the temporary platform that had been constructed to display the full site model. Standing there with the property spread out before us, the autumn sun highlighting the natural contours of the land, I felt a surge of pride and purpose. This was exactly what my father had envisioned: development that respected the land's natural features while creating something useful and sustainable for the community. "It's really something," Emma said quietly, standing beside me while Jacob continued his animated conversation with Hector a few yards away. "Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational rather than challenging. She shrugged slightly. "Something more corporate, I guess. This feels more integrated with the town, more considerate of what's already here." "That was the goal," I acknowledged. "To build something that belongs here, not something imposed on the community." We stood in silence for a moment, watching as Jacob meticulously examined every detail of the site model. "He might have a future in architecture or engineering," I observed. "He asks really insightful questions." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "He's been drawing buildings nonstop since he saw your plans. His teacher called last week to ask what sparked his sudden interest. Apparently, he's been designing his own community center during math class." The shared pride in her son created a momentary bridge between us, a reminder of connections that existed beyond our recent conflicts. As we prepared to leave, Emma surprised me again. "Would you have time for coffee before you head back to your hotel? There's something I'd like to discuss." "Sure," I agreed, cautiously optimistic about her initiative. "Mom can take Jacob back to the house if that works for you." Emma nodded, and we arranged the logistics with minimal awkwardness. 30 minutes later, we were seated across from each other at Westridge Coffee, a local cafe we'd both frequented since high school. The familiar environment seemed to ease some of the tension between us. "Jacob loves the project," Emma said after our drinks arrived. "He hasn't been this excited about anything since before the divorce." "He's got a good eye," I replied. "And he asks great questions." Emma wrapped her hands around her mug, her expression turning more serious. "Seeing the actual plans today, walking the property, it's different than I imagined. More thoughtful." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I may have reacted to the situation without fully understanding what you were trying to create." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Emma, it was significant, an acknowledgement that her opposition had been based on incomplete information and personal bias. "I appreciate you saying that," I said simply, not wanting to push for more than she was ready to give. She nodded slightly, then looked directly at me. "Is there still room for local input on the commercial spaces? Because I've been thinking about the kinds of businesses that might thrive there, given the neighborhood demographics." The question caught me by surprise, not confrontational but constructive, offering professional expertise rather than creating obstacles. "Absolutely," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "That's actually an area where we could use more local insight." As we discussed potential approaches to the commercial development, I felt a careful optimism begin to take root. This wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was communication, professional, respectful, focused on a shared interest rather than personal grievances. Winter descended on our hometown with unexpected ferocity that year. Heavy snowfall in November followed by an ice storm that temporarily halted construction on Bennett Commons. I extended my stay, unwilling to return to Seattle while the project faced weather-related challenges. The delay should have been frustrating, but it created an unexpected opportunity to deepen the tentative reconnection that had begun during the site visit with Emma and Jacob. "The commercial tenant mix needs careful consideration," Emma said during one of our increasingly frequent working sessions. We'd established a neutral pattern of meeting at local cafes rather than at our mother's house, creating a professional context that allowed us to sidestep the deeper emotional issues still simmering beneath the surface. "The right anchor businesses will determine whether the entire development feels cohesive or fragmented." I nodded, appreciating her expertise despite our complicated history. "What are you thinking?" She spread out market analysis documents across the table, demographic studies, consumer behavior reports, and competitor assessments she'd prepared. It was thorough professional work that showcased the strategic thinking she typically reserved for her high-end clients. "We should focus on businesses that serve multiple community needs," she explained, pointing to various sections of her analysis. "A locally owned grocery store that stocks both everyday essentials and specialty items. A cafe that transforms into a wine bar in the evenings. Flexible spaces that can host everything from children's activities to senior wellness programs." The thoughtfulness of her approach surprised me. I'd expected Emma to push for luxury boutiques or high-end restaurants that would maximize rental income, but potentially alienate much of the local community. Instead, she'd developed a vision that balanced commercial viability with genuine community service, much like the overall concept for Bennett Commons itself. "This is excellent work," I acknowledged, reviewing her projections. "It aligns perfectly with what we're trying to create." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly masked by professional composure. She wasn't accustomed to straightforward praise from me. Our interactions had more often been characterized by polite distance or outright conflict. "I know the local market," she said with a shrug that didn't quite hide her satisfaction. "And I've been thinking about what Dad would have wanted. He always talked about businesses that serve real needs, not just wants." The mention of our father, made without tension or manipulation, marked another small step forward. We'd been carefully avoiding direct discussions of the inheritance dispute or the painful town council meeting, focusing instead on the practical aspects of the development. But these oblique acknowledgments of our shared history, of the values our father had instilled in both of us despite our differences, created tiny bridges across the chasm that had separated us for so long. Our working relationship developed its own rhythm over the following weeks. Emma's real estate expertise proved genuinely valuable, particularly her understanding of which local business owners might be interested in expanding into the new development. My technology background complemented her market knowledge, allowing us to design flexible spaces that could adapt to changing business needs over time. One snowy afternoon in mid-December, as we wrapped up a particularly productive planning session, Emma's professional facade briefly slipped. "I was wrong, you know," she said suddenly, staring into her coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. "About the land, about what you're doing with it, about a lot of things." I stayed silent, sensing that interrupting might cause her to retreat back into safer, more impersonal territory. "When Dad first told me he was leaving the land to you, I was furious," she continued after a moment. "I couldn't understand why he would give something so valuable to my little sister who didn't even live here anymore, who seemed to have so little ambition compared to me." The admission stung, but there was no malice in her tone, only a tired honesty that had been long overdue. "I convinced myself he was being unfair, playing favorites," she went on. "It was easier than admitting that maybe he saw something in you that I didn't want to see. That maybe he understood both of us better than we understood ourselves." She finally looked up, her expression unusually vulnerable. "I'm not good at being wrong, Lily. I never have been." "I know," I said gently. "It runs in the family." A surprised laugh escaped her. "God, it really does, doesn't it? Dad was the same way." The shared observation created another small connection, a recognition of the traits we'd both inherited, for better or worse. "I should have told you about Blue Matrix," I admitted. "About what I was building, keeping. Its secret wasn't just about independence. It was also about, I don't know, proving something maybe. Showing that I could succeed completely on my own terms." Emma nodded slowly. "And I should have respected Dad's decision, whatever his reasons. Instead, I made it about me, about what I thought I deserved." She sighed, running a finger around the rim of her mug. The divorce hit me harder than I let anyone see. I was determined to maintain the same lifestyle, prove to everyone, especially Philip, that I was fine, thriving even. It became this performance that I couldn't stop, even when it was driving me into debt. The honesty of her admission felt like a gift, one I hadn't expected and wasn't entirely sure how to receive. Our relationship had never been characterized by this kind of vulnerability, this willingness to acknowledge flaws and missteps. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, the question encompassing far more than our professional collaboration. Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I'd like to keep working on the commercial aspect of Bennett Commons, if you'll have me. Not as a favor or charity, but because I genuinely think I can add value." "You already have," I assured her. "Your market analysis alone has saved us months of research." She nodded, a tentative smile forming. "And the other stuff, the personal stuff, maybe we just keep talking? Not trying to fix everything at once, but not ignoring it either?" "I'd like that," I agreed, relieved by the measured approach she was suggesting. Neither of us was ready for grand emotional reconciliations or complete absolution. But this, careful, intentional rebuilding of trust through shared work and honest conversation, felt sustainable in a way that forced forgiveness never could be. As December progressed, our professional collaboration expanded to include occasional family dinners at our mother's house. The first was awkward, conversation halting and overly polite. But by the third or fourth gathering, a new kind of ease began to develop. Not the unthinking familiarity of our childhood, but something more deliberate and, in some ways, more authentic. The weather finally broke just before Christmas, allowing construction to resume on Bennett Commons. The delay had actually benefited the project, giving us time to refine plans and strengthen community support. Emma's involvement had gone a long way toward convincing former skeptics that the development would genuinely serve local interests rather than bringing unwanted outside influences. "The municipal approvals are all in place," Brady confirmed, during our final meeting before the holiday break. "Construction can proceed full steam in January, assuming the weather cooperates." "That's excellent news," I said, gathering the signed permits. "We're still on track for a fall completion date for Phase 1. As I left City Hall, I found Emma waiting by my car, bundled against the cold in a practical parka rather than the designer wear she would have insisted on just months earlier. "Good news?" she asked, nodding toward the documents in my hand. "All systems go," I confirmed. "We can start the new year with accelerated construction." "Perfect timing," she said. "Listen, I have an idea I wanted to run by you, about the community center naming." We'd been deliberating about how best to honor our father in the development's design. The current plans called for the main community building to be named Thomas Bennett Center for Innovation, but Emma had expressed concerns that it sounded too formal, too corporate for a man who had been known for his approachable, practical nature. "What are you thinking?" I asked as we walked toward a nearby cafe, seeking refuge from the biting wind. "Bennett Family Innovation Center," she suggested once we were settled with steaming cups of hot chocolate. "It honors Dad while acknowledging that this is about more than just one person's legacy. It's about the values he instilled in his family, the vision we're all now part of creating together." The suggestion caught me by surprise, not because of the idea itself, which was excellent, but because of the shift it represented in Emma's thinking. For months, even after beginning to work together, she had framed the project as Lily's development, or Dad's land. This was the first time she had positioned it as a shared family endeavor, something that connected all of us rather than dividing us. "I think that's perfect," I said sincerely. "It captures exactly what we're trying to build." Emma smiled, a genuine expression free from the calculation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. "I was hoping you'd like it. Mom does too. I ran it by her yesterday." "You two have been talking about the project?" I asked, surprised again. Their relationship had been strained since the town council meeting where our mother had publicly supported my vision over Emma's objections. Emma nodded, looking slightly self-conscious. We've been meeting for coffee once a week, talking through a lot of things. Family history, patterns we've fallen into. It's been uncomfortable, honestly, but necessary. I'm glad, I said, meaning it completely. For both of you. She's different now, Emma observed. More direct, less worried about keeping the peace at all costs. It's strange sometimes, but also kind of refreshing. I understood exactly what she meant. Our mother's newfound willingness to speak difficult truths rather than smooth over conflict had fundamentally altered the family dynamic, creating space for more authentic, if occasionally uncomfortable, interactions between all of us. As Christmas approached, I found myself looking forward to the holiday for the first time in years. Previously, family gatherings had been exercises in performative harmony, everyone playing assigned roles while carefully avoiding any topics that might disrupt the facade of perfect familial happiness. This year promised something different, not perfection, but honesty. Not unbroken harmony, but the more complex music of individuals learning to accommodate each other's authentic selves. The morning of Christmas Eve, I woke to an email notification that momentarily took my breath away. The final acquisition offer from Wentworth Capital had arrived. After months of negotiation, they had accepted all our terms. Strategic investment rather than complete acquisition, maintaining our existing leadership team, creating the new community development division with significant resource allocation. The attached documents included the final valuation. Blue Matrix Solutions, the company I had built from nothing, was now officially worth $7 million. The final valuation of Blue Matrix felt like a vindication, not just of my business acumen, but of the quiet, methodical approach I'd taken throughout my life. In a world that often rewarded flash over substance, immediate results over patient building, I had created something of lasting value through persistence and vision. I forwarded the documents to Dominic with a simple message. We did it. His response came within minutes. Never doubted you for a second, boss. Seattle office celebrating with champagne at noon. Join via video? I smiled at the thought of my team, celebrating across the country, pictured the sleek conference room filled with the brilliant, dedicated people who had helped build Blue Matrix from concept to thriving enterprise. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. Before joining the video celebration, I took a moment to call my mother. The deal went through, I told her when she answered. Final valuation came in even higher than we anticipated. Oh, Lily, that's wonderful. Her genuine enthusiasm warmed me. Will you still be able to make it for Christmas Eve dinner? The kids are so excited to see you. Absolutely, I assured her. I just need to join a video call with my team at noon. Then, I'll head over to help with preparations. Christmas Eve dinner had always been a Bennett family tradition, the one holiday ritual that remained constant throughout our childhood and into adulthood. This year carried special significance as the first since my father's passing and the first since our family's painful conflicts and tentative reconciliation. The video call with the Blue Matrix team was joyful chaos. 30-plus employees raising glasses from the Seattle office while I joined from my hotel room, everyone talking over each other in their excitement. Dominic eventually called for quiet, raising his glass in a more formal toast. To Lily Bennett, he said, his expression unusually solemn, who taught us all that success doesn't have to come at the cost of integrity, that leadership can be quiet but profound, and that the best innovations serve real human needs rather than creating artificial ones. The sentiment caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. To all of you, I countered once I'd composed myself. This isn't my achievement alone. It belongs to everyone who believed in this vision and worked to make it reality. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. Blue Matrix had begun as a simple idea, using predictive algorithms to solve supply chain inefficiencies for mid-sized businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level solutions. From that seed had grown something that now employed dozens of people, served hundreds of clients, and would soon expand into community development applications through the Bennett Commons project. The full-circle nature of it struck me powerfully. My father's legacy, the land he had carefully assembled over decades, was now connecting with the company I had built independently. The values that had guided both endeavors were remarkably similar: patient building, practical problem solving, creating something of lasting benefit rather than quick profit. As I packed the few belongings I'd need for the next couple of days at my mother's house, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Heard the big news from Mom. Congrats, sis. Well earned." The simple acknowledgement meant more coming from Emma than effusive praise would have from anyone else. Throughout our childhood and early adulthood, she had rarely recognized my achievements, always quick to minimize or dismiss anything that might shift attention from her own accomplishments. This straightforward recognition, free from qualifiers or comparisons, felt like another small step in our healing process. My mother's house glowed with warmth as I approached that evening, windows illuminated against the early winter darkness, the front door adorned with the same simple pine wreath she had hung every Christmas for as long as I could remember. Inside, the familiar sense of cinnamon, pine, and roasting turkey created an immediate sense of homecoming. "There she is," my nephew Jacob exclaimed as I entered, running to greet me with an enthusiasm that warmed my heart. "Aunt Lily, can I show you my designs? I made a whole new building for Bennett Commons." "Absolutely," I assured him, setting down my overnight bag. "Let me say hello to everyone first, then you can show me everything." The living room was filled with family, my mother arranging holly sprigs in a crystal vase, Emma helping Zoe hang the last of the ornaments on the Christmas tree, my brother-in-law's parents chatting by the fireplace. The scene was both familiar and new, traditional elements blending with a different emotional atmosphere than previous holidays had carried. "The woman of the hour," my mother said warmly, embracing me. "Congratulations on your company's success, darling. Your father would have been so proud." "He would have been proud of all of this," I replied, gesturing to encompass the room. Not just the holiday decorations, but the family gathering in genuine rather than performative harmony. Emma approached next, her hug brief but sincere. 15.7 million, she murmured, shaking her head with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "And to think I assumed you were barely making ends meet in middle management." "Appearances can be deceiving," I replied with a slight smile. "Something I think we've both learned this year." She nodded, acknowledging the truth in that observation. "Jacob's been drawing building plans all afternoon, waiting to show you. He's quite serious about becoming an architect now." "I can't wait to see them," I said, genuinely looking forward to my nephew's creative efforts. His interest in the Bennett Commons project had become a bridge between Emma and me, a shared point of connection unmarred by our complicated history. The evening unfolded with a naturalness that had been absent from family gatherings for years. Conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from Bennett Commons developments to Blue Matrix's expansion to Jacob's architectural ambitions and Zoe's recent science fair victory. Even when the discussion briefly turned to potentially sensitive topics, like my father's foresight regarding the land's value, the old tensions remained subdued, replaced by a more thoughtful engagement with our shared history. After dinner, as the adults lingered around the table with glasses of wine while the children played in the adjacent room, Emma broached a subject I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about what you said months ago," she began, her tone contemplative rather than confrontational, "about how keeping your success secret wasn't just about independence but about proving something. I think I understand that better now." I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. For me, it was always about being seen, being recognized, she continued, tracing her finger around the rim of her wine glass. Dad's approval, Mom's attention, recognition from clients, envy from friends. External validation was how I measured my worth. My mother reached over to cover Emma's hand with her own, a gesture of support that would have been unimaginable just months ago, both the vulnerability from Emma and the quiet acknowledgement from our mother. When I saw what you'd built, this successful company no one knew about, not even family, it challenged everything about how I'd structured my life, Emma admitted. You created this incredible thing without anyone watching, without seeking approval at each step. I couldn't comprehend it at first. We're different people, I said simply. We always have been. Yes, but I think Dad understood that in ways I'm just beginning to, she replied. He knew I needed different things from him than you did. He gave me constant encouragement because I required it. He gave you space and independence because that's what you thrived on. My mother nodded slowly. Tom was more perceptive than I often gave him credit for. He saw patterns in behavior, in relationships, that I missed completely. He saw potential in both of us, I agreed. Just different kinds of potential that needed different kinds of nurturing. As the conversation continued, I realized we were engaging with our family history in a new way, not through the lens of competition or grievance, but with a genuine attempt to understand the dynamics that had shaped us, for better and worse. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, not yet. But it was honest reckoning, the necessary foundation for authentic healing. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into bed with promises that Santa would indeed find them at their grandmother's house, I joined my mother on the back porch. Despite the winter chill, she had always loved sitting outside on Christmas Eve, watching the stars while sipping her traditional glass of port. I keep expecting to see your father come around the corner with more firewood, she said softly as I took the seat beside her, especially on nights like this. I know, I acknowledged. I feel his absence too, but also his presence in strange ways. In the land development, in conversations about values and legacy. She nodded, her profile illuminated by the soft glow from the kitchen windows. He would be pleased with how things are unfolding, not just the projects, though he would certainly approve of those, but with how the three of us are finding our way back to each other. It hasn't been an easy road, I observed. The worthwhile ones rarely are, she replied, echoing one of my father's favorite sayings. After a comfortable silence, she added, I owe you an apology, Lily. One I should have offered months ago. For what, specifically? I asked, not unkindly but genuinely curious about which aspect of our complicated history she was addressing. For never truly seeing you, she said simply. For assuming your quietness meant you needed less attention, less support, less recognition than your sister. For not asking the right questions about your life, your work, your dreams. The directness of her apology, free from excuses or qualifications, reflected the new honesty that had been developing between us since the town council meeting. I accepted early on that Emma required more active parenting, I told her. She needed the spotlight in ways I didn't. It wasn't that I didn't want your attention. I just found other ways to define myself when it wasn't readily available. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears in the dim light. But that's just it. You shouldn't have had to. A child shouldn't need to be demanding to receive equal consideration. I reached over to take her hand, finding it cold despite her gloves. We can't rewrite the past, Mom, but we can acknowledge it honestly and build something better going forward. She squeezed my hand in silent agreement, and we sat together, watching our breath form small clouds in the winter air, the vast, starry sky stretching above us. In that quiet moment, I felt my father's presence more strongly than I had since his passing, not as a sharp pang of grief, but as a gentle certainty that he would approve of this careful, honest rebuilding of family bonds. Christmas morning brought the chaotic joy of children opening presents, followed by a lazy breakfast that stretched into midday. As we cleared away the dishes, Emma approached me with an envelope. "I was going to wait until later," she said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "but this feels like the right moment." I opened it to find a formal letter on her real estate company letterhead, offering her services as commercial leasing manager for Bennett Commons at a standard industry rate. "You're applying for a job?" I asked, surprised. She nodded, maintaining steady eye contact despite her evident nervousness. "A real position, based on merit and expertise. No family favors, no entitlement. I want to earn my place in this project." The formality of the approach, a proper business proposal rather than an assumption of inclusion, represented perhaps the most profound shift in our relationship. Emma was acknowledging boundaries, recognizing that involvement in the project would be based on contribution rather than familial obligation. "I'll need to review this with the development team," I said, maintaining the professional tone she had established. "But speaking personally, I think your qualifications are excellent, and your knowledge of the local market would be an asset to the project." Relief and satisfaction flickered across her face. "That's all I'm asking for. Fair consideration." "You'll have it," I promised, folding the letter carefully and tucking it into my pocket. "Merry Christmas, Emma." "Merry Christmas, Lily," she replied, a genuine smile softening her features. "It's going to be an interesting year." The year that followed was indeed interesting, challenging, transformative, and ultimately rewarding, in ways I couldn't have anticipated that Christmas morning. Winter gave way to spring, bringing accelerated construction on Bennett Commons and strategic expansion at Blue Matrix. My life settled into a new rhythm, dividing time between Seattle and my hometown, between CEO responsibilities and development oversight. Emma joined the Bennett Commons team officially in February after a formal interview process that included other candidates, her insistence, not mine. She wanted to earn the position on merit alone, to prove to herself as much as to others that she could succeed without leveraging family connections. The commercial spaces became her domain, and she approached the work with unexpected diligence and creativity. "We've secured commitments from 17 local businesses," she reported during an April project meeting, her carefully organized presentation reflecting hours of behind-the-scenes work. "Including that organic grocery cooperative you wanted for the anchor space." "That's impressive," I acknowledged, genuinely surprised by her success with the cooperative, which had initially been hesitant to expand beyond their original location. "How did you convince Harvest Community to sign on?" Emma smiled, a flash of her old confidence but without the accompanying arrogance. "I listened to their concerns about maintaining their values while scaling up. Then I connected them with that sustainable business consultant you work with in Seattle. Together, we developed a growth model that preserves their cooperative structure while allowing for expansion." The thoughtfulness of her approach, prioritizing the business's values rather than simply securing a prestigious tenant, reflected how much she had grown over the past months. She was applying her considerable talent and charm toward building something sustainable rather than chasing quick wins or status symbols. Our mother had found her own place in the project, coordinating community outreach for the educational programs that would operate from the Bennett Center. Her decades of volunteer work had given her connections throughout the town's social services, schools, and civic organizations, relationships that proved invaluable as we developed programs to serve real community needs. "The school district is interested in creating a technology partnership," she told me during one of our regular planning sessions. "They don't have the budget for a full computer science curriculum, but if we can provide the facility and equipment, they can allocate teaching resources." These collaborations, Emma handling commercial development, my mother coordinating educational partnerships, me overseeing the overall project while running Blue Matrix, created a balance that played to each of our strengths. We were building something together, each contributing in meaningful ways without competing for control or recognition. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Bennett Family Innovation Center in late May drew hundreds of community members. Standing on the temporary platform with Emma and my mother flanking me, I felt a profound sense of rightness, not just about the project itself, but about the healing that had occurred within our family to make this moment possible. Before we officially break ground, I said, addressing the gathered crowd, I want to acknowledge that this project represents more than just a development. It embodies values my father lived by, investing in community, building for the long term rather than quick profit, and creating opportunities for others to grow. I glanced at my mother and Emma, both watching attentively from their seats on the platform. It also represents a family legacy that has evolved through collaboration, through each of us contributing our unique strengths toward a shared vision. The Bennett Family Innovation Center will carry forward not just my father's name, but the values he instilled in all of us. As I handed ceremonial shovels to my mother and Emma, inviting them to join me for the symbolic turning of earth, we caught the glimmer of tears in my mother's eyes. Emma, ever more comfortable with public emotions than either my mother or I, didn't bother hiding hers, squeezing my hand briefly before we stepped forward together. Local media coverage of the event emphasized the family story behind the development, not the conflict that had initially divided us, but the collaboration that had ultimately brought us together. Bennett Women Carry Forward Family Legacy, read one headline, accompanied by a photo of the three of us with shovels in hand, standing on the land my father had so carefully assembled over decades. Summer brought both progress and challenges. Construction delays due to supply chain issues, ironically, the very problem Blue Matrix's software had been designed to mitigate, pushed back completion dates for several key structures. Emma's careful tenant relationships were tested when projected move-in dates had to be adjusted. My time was stretched increasingly thin between Seattle and hometown responsibilities. You need to delegate more, Dominic advised during a late-night strategy session in the Seattle office. Both here and with the development project. You can't keep this pace up indefinitely. He was right, of course. The strain of managing both worlds was taking a toll, manifesting in missed meals, shortened sleep, and a persistent tension headache that medication barely touched. The successful woman featured in business publications as the innovative founder of Blue Matrix was functioning on autopilot more often than I cared to admit. The solution came from an unexpected direction. During a routine project meeting in Nakiai, July, Emma made an observation that changed the trajectory of my professional life. You know, the systems you've developed for Blue Matrix could really streamline our construction management, she noted, as we discussed the latest delays. The predictive modeling for inventory could be adapted to track building materials, anticipate shortages before they impact timelines. I've been thinking about that, I admitted, but adapting the software would require significant development, resources, and my team is stretched thin with our core business commitments. Emma's expression became thoughtful. What if we became the test case for your community development division? Use Bennett Commons as the pilot project to adapt your technology for a new market. The suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than trying to manage two separate entities, Blue Matrix and Bennett Commons, as parallel but unconnected responsibilities, we could integrate them, using the development as a real-world laboratory for expanding Blue Matrix's business model. Within weeks, we had established a formal partnership. A small team from Blue Matrix relocated temporarily to our hometown office, working directly with the construction and development teams to adapt our supply chain software for community development applications. The collaboration energized both projects, creating synergies neither could have achieved alone. This is exactly what the strategic investment was meant to fund, I told the Wentworth Capital representative during their quarterly site visit in August. Practical applications of our core technology in new sectors, with real-world testing and refinement. The integration of the two projects didn't just make business sense, it also allowed me to unify my divided professional life. Rather than constantly shifting between separate responsibilities, I could approach both through a cohesive vision that leveraged the strengths of each. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the rich colors of changing leaves, Bennett Commons began to take tangible shape. The community center's distinctive curved roof became visible from the main road into town. The first residential units were nearing completion, their sustainable design features already attracting interest from potential residents. The commercial spaces Emma had so carefully curated were being finished according to tenant specifications, creating a diverse ecosystem of local businesses rather than the cookie-cutter retail typical of new developments. Standing on the observation deck we'd built for community members to safely view the construction progress, I often found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. Just over a year earlier, I had sat across from my mother and sister at a dining table, hearing them explain why I should give up my inheritance to serve Emma's needs. Now we stood as partners in bringing that inheritance to its fullest potential, each contributing in ways that honored my father's legacy while creating something new and meaningful. One evening in early October, as sunset bathed the construction, sight in golden light, Emma joined me on the observation deck. We stood in companionable silence for several minutes, watching as workers completed their daily tasks below. "Do you ever wonder what Dad would think of all this?" she asked finally, gesturing toward the emerging development. "All the time," I admitted. "I like to think he'd approve." Emma nodded slowly. "He would. It's exactly what he envisioned. For this land, something that serves the community while maintaining its unique character." She paused, then added quietly, "I wish I'd understood that sooner." The simple acknowledgement represented how far we'd come. Emma's willingness to recognize her earlier misunderstanding without defensiveness, my ability to hear it without needing to prove I'd been right all along. "We got here eventually," I offered. "That's what matters." She smiled slightly, her gaze still fixed on the construction activity below. "You know, for years I thought I had to be the successful one, the high achiever who carried forward Dad's legacy. Finding out about Blue Matrix, about what you'd built completely on your own, it shook my whole self-image." "It wasn't a competition," I said gently. "No, but I made it one," she acknowledged. "I defined success so narrowly. Visible achievements, status markers, things people could see and envy. I completely missed the kind of quiet, substantial building you were doing." The honesty of this reflection, delivered without drama or expectation of response, felt like the culmination of months of gradual healing between us. Not perfect reconciliation or erasing of past hurts, but authentic recognition of patterns that had shaped our relationship and genuine effort to create healthier ones. "We're different people," I said, echoing words I'd spoken at Christmas. "We always have been. Maybe that's not something to overcome, but something to leverage, complementary strengths rather than competing approaches." Emma considered this, then nodded. "That's exactly what we've done with Bennett Commons, isn't it? My local knowledge and relationship building, your strategic vision and technological expertise, Mom's community connections, different strengths creating something none of us could have built alone." The grand opening of Phase 1 was scheduled for November, 1 year after the contentious town council meeting where our family conflict had played out so publicly. The symmetry felt appropriate, a full circle that transformed division into collaboration. The week before the opening, I received an unexpected call from Brady Sullivan, the mayor who had moderated that tense meeting 12 months earlier. "The town council would like to recognize the Bennett family at the ribbon-cutting ceremony," he explained. "Not just for the development itself, but for demonstrating how family businesses can evolve through generations while maintaining core values." "That's very kind," I said. "But Emma and I have been careful to keep the focus on the community benefits of the project, not on our personal story." "That's precisely why the recognition is warranted," Brady countered. "Your family has created something that genuinely serves this town's needs while honoring its character. That deserves acknowledgement. After consulting with Emma and my mother, I accepted the council's proposal. We agreed that any recognition should emphasize the collaborative nature of the project, not just within our family, but with the broader community whose input had shaped everything from the architectural design to the educational programs planned for the center. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and crisp, perfect November weather that showcased the fall colors still clinging to trees throughout the development. The ceremony was scheduled for midday, allowing maximum community attendance. By 11, the parking area was already filling with local residents, business owners, and media representatives. Standing in the small preparation room behind the community center's main hall, I watched through the window as people gathered. In the plaza, Jacob and Zoe darted between adults, proudly wearing Bennett Commons staff t-shirts Emma had made specially for them. My mother greeted longtime friends and neighbors, her natural social grace evident in every interaction. Emma moved between the commercial tenants, ensuring last-minute details were addressed before the formal opening. "Quite a turnout," Harold observed, joining me at the window. My father's attorney and friend had become a trusted advisor throughout the development process, offering both legal guidance and personal support. "More than we expected," I agreed. "It's heartening to see so much community interest." Harold nodded, his expression contemplative. "Thomas would be proud, not just of what you've built, but of how you've built it, with integrity, vision, and ultimately together." "It wasn't always together," I reminded him, thinking of the painful months of conflict before reconciliation began. "No," he acknowledged, "but families rarely move in perfect unison. What matters is finding your way back to shared purpose, even if the path there has detours." The wisdom of his observation stayed with me as we moved to the main hall for the ceremony. The space was filled beyond capacity, with community members standing along the walls and spilling out into the adjacent corridor. Brady welcomed everyone, his genuine enthusiasm for the project evident in every word. "Today marks not just the opening of a development," he told the gathered crowd, "but the beginning of a new chapter for our community. Bennett Commons represents the best kind of growth, thoughtful, sustainable, and deeply rooted in local values." As the ceremony progressed, various stakeholders spoke briefly, the school superintendent highlighting the technology education programs, the head of the grocery cooperative explaining their expanded model, the director of the senior center describing new intergenerational initiatives that would operate from the community building. Finally, Brady invited my mother, Emma, and me to join him at the podium. "The Bennett family has been part of this community for generations," he said, "contributing to its growth and character in countless ways. This development continues that tradition through the vision and collaboration of three remarkable women." As we stood together, I felt a profound sense of completion, not an ending, but the establishment of a new beginning built on stronger foundations than before. My mother spoke first, her voice steady and clear as she thanked the community for their support and input. Emma followed, highlighting the local businesses that would bring the commercial spaces to life and the community benefits they would provide. When my turn came, I found myself temporarily overwhelmed by the journey that had brought us to this moment. From inheritance dispute to collaborative vision, from family conflict to genuine partnership. A little over a year ago, I began. This project existed only as potential. Lines on paper, numbers in projections, a vision of what might be possible. Today, it exists as reality because of the contributions of countless individuals, from construction workers to community advisors to business owners, willing to take a chance on a new concept. I glanced at my mother and sister standing beside me. Most importantly, it exists because of a family's willingness to transform conflict into collaboration, to recognize that different perspectives and skills can create something stronger than any individual vision. As we cut the ribbon together, my mother, Emma, and I each holding a section of the ceremonial scissors. The applause that erupted felt like affirmation not just of the development itself, but of the journey that had created it. The reception that followed allowed community members to explore the completed spaces. The community center with its flexible design, the first residential units showcasing sustainable features, the commercial area where local businesses were hosting preview events ahead of their official openings. Standing near the center's main entrance, watching people move through the space with expressions of curiosity and approval, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found Jacob looking up at me with serious eyes. "Aunt Lily, did you know I helped design part of this building?" he asked, his voice carrying the particular pride of an 8-year-old who has contributed to something important. "I absolutely did," I assured him, crouching to his level. "The reading nook in the children's area was your idea, wasn't it?" He nodded vigorously. "And Mom says maybe I can help design more buildings when I grow up. She says I have a natural talent for architecture." "Your mom is right about that," I agreed, glancing across the room where Emma was chatting with several of the commercial tenants. "You have a wonderful eye for design." "Mom says I got that from Grandpa," he confided. "She says he could look at empty land and see exactly what should be built there." The observation, simple but profound in its multi-generational connection, brought unexpected emotion. My father's legacy lived on not just in the physical development that bore his name, but in the talents and values passing to the next generation. As the afternoon progressed into evening, the formal ceremony gave way to a community celebration, with food from local vendors, music from a hometown band, and the particular warmth that comes from shared accomplishment. I circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and feedback with equal appreciation, noting ideas for Phase 2 adjustments based on initial community responses. Eventually, I found a quiet moment alone in the small garden area behind the community center, a peaceful space designed for reflection, with benches positioned to catch both morning and afternoon light. The landscaping was still new, plants not yet grown to their intended size, but the bones of the design were evident, a space that would mature and evolve over years, becoming more beautiful with time. "There you are," my mother said, joining me on the bench. "Taking a breather from all the excitement?" I nodded, grateful for her understanding. Despite years in business leadership, large social gatherings still drained me in ways they never seemed to affect Emma. "It's all quite remarkable," she observed, looking around at the garden space. "Not just the physical buildings, but what they represent. How far we've all come in a year." "It's been quite a journey," I agreed. She was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "I've been thinking about what you told us that day at the restaurant, about your company, about the life you'd built that none of us knew about. At first, I felt hurt that you'd kept so much from us. But over time, I've come to understand why you needed that separation." I waited, giving her space to continue. "Our family dynamics didn't allow you much room to develop your own identity," she acknowledged. "Emma took up so much emotional space, and I enabled that pattern rather than challenging it. Building something completely separate was perhaps the only way you could truly discover your own capabilities." The insight surprised me, not the observation itself, which aligned with my own understanding, but her ability to articulate it so clearly, to see patterns that had been invisible to her for decades. "It wasn't a conscious decision at first," I told her. "When I moved to Seattle, keeping my professional life separate just felt easier. Over time, it became more intentional, a space where I could define myself by my own standards, not in comparison to Emma or anyone else." My mother nodded slowly. "And now that those worlds have collided and merged?" I considered the question, looking out over the development that represented both my inheritance and my own creation. "Now it feels right to have them connected. The separation served its purpose. It allowed me to build my confidence, my identity. separate from family expectations. But integration feels like the natural next step. She smiled, a gentle expression that reminded me suddenly and powerfully of my father. That's what growth looks like, I think. Building boundaries when we need them, opening doorways when we're ready. As twilight settled over Bennett Commons, casting long shadows across the newly constructed buildings and carefully planned green spaces, I found myself filled with a profound sense of completion. Not an ending. There was still Phase 2 to develop, Blue Matrix's Community Applications Division to expand, family relationships to continue nurturing, but the satisfaction of having transformed conflict into creation, of having honored my father's legacy while establishing my own. The inheritance he had left me, land valued at approximately $2 million, had been the catalyst for revealing my own success, for establishing healthier family dynamics, and for creating something that would serve the community for generations to come. What had begun as a painful dispute had evolved into a collaborative vision worth far more than the monetary value of any single asset. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and only family remained, Emma approached me with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to me with a small smile. "Remember last year at the town council meeting, when I stormed out after Mom? Read Dad's letter?" she asked, her tone rueful but not bitter. I nodded, accepting the glass. Hard to forget. "I was so angry," she admitted. Not just at losing control of the narrative, but at realizing Dad had seen me so clearly, both my strengths and my limitations. It took me months to accept that his decision wasn't about loving you more or valuing you higher, but about matching the right resource to the right steward. She gestured around us at the community center, now quiet except for cleanup crews preparing for the next day's formal opening to the public. "You were the right steward for this vision. I see that now. What you've created honors him perfectly." The acknowledgement, straightforward, without qualifications or lingering resentment, felt like the final piece settling into place in our transformed relationship. "We created it together," I corrected gently. "Each contributing what we do best." Emma smiled, raising her glass slightly. "To Bennett Commons," she proposed, "and to Dad, who somehow knew what each of us needed before we did." "To Dad," I agreed, touching my glass to hers. "And to family legacies, both the ones we inherit and the ones we create." As we stood there in the quiet of the completed community center, surrounded by the tangible results of our collaborative efforts, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. My mother had been right about growth, about building, boundaries when needed, and opening doorways when ready. The secret company I'd built had given me the strength and confidence to stand firm when my inheritance was threatened. That firmness, in turn, had catalyzed a painful but necessary transformation in our family dynamics. The $10 million company I'd revealed in response to my mother's assertion that my sister deserved my inheritance had become something more valuable than its impressive valuation. It had become the foundation for a new kind of family legacy, one built on mutual respect, complementary strengths, and shared purpose rather than competition or comparison. Standing beside my sister in the building that bore our family name, I felt a deep certainty that this was exactly what my father had intended all along. Not just the development itself, but the journey of growth and healing that created it. As his letter had said, the land represented possibility. Through conflict and reconciliation, through individual achievement and collaborative creation, we had transformed that possibility into reality. A legacy worthy of the Bennett name. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.